Hey guys, Patrick here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a PhD student in immunology and microbiology. And today we have a special guest on the show. Her name is Ida, and you might want to introduce yourself really quick.
Okay, sounds good. Hi guys, like you said, my name is Ida and I'm a first year medical student in the United States, and I'm here to talk to you guys about vitamin D with this guy.
Exactly. So vitamin D is today's topic. Vitamin D is one of the hottest vitamins out there right now. But there's a lot of confusion towards its benefits, if you should supplement it or not, and what are the best sources to get it from, and what are the adequate levels you should aim for. And I think we can just start off by having Ida explain us a little bit about the biochemistry of vitamin D.
Yeah, sure, sounds good. So like I said, I'm a first year medical student, and so my first semester here was last year, and during that year we focused a lot on the biochemistry and the biochemical reactions that happen in our body every single day. And during one of our units we focused on all the vitamins, particularly the fat soluble vitamins was one of the units I found most interesting, and vitamin D is one of those fat soluble vitamins along with E, A, and K. And so while we were learning about vitamin D, I found it particularly interesting because I got to see a lot of application about my knowledge from class in the clinic. And so what's really cool about vitamin D is that it's really more like a hormone than it is a cofactor for a lot of biochemical reactions in our body. And because it's a hormone, or acts more like it is just like a hormone, right? Because it is just like a hormone. It's particularly interesting and really important for our body. And one of the most important things that it's important for in our body is building strong bones. And so vitamin D is really important and works alongside parathyroid hormone to stimulate bone building or bone buildup through the function of osteoblasts, which are cells in our body that help to build up our bone.
So let me ask you, are there some clinical symptoms of extreme vitamin D deficiency in regard to bone health?
There are. So a long time ago, rickets was a huge problem. And what rickets is like a disease mainly seen in younger children who have malformed bones. A few key clinical signs of rickets that we learned about in class was protruding sternum, so a chest that kind of protruded out, along with bowed legs. Bowed legs was really a huge clue that we were dealing with rickets. And so a long time ago, this was a really big problem. But then a scientist discovered that if you gave children cod liver oil, that suddenly no children would get rickets after having been fed cod liver oil throughout part of their childhood, right?
Yeah.
And so through that kind of experiment, we discovered that, vitamin D is super important because a lot of vitamin D is actually found in cod liver oil. And that's how we kind of made the connection between bone health and vitamin D.
Okay, yeah. We will come to good sources of vitamin D a little later.
Yeah.
Okay, so rickets is one big problem.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, there are still ricket cases actually nowadays, which is kind of surprising to me because we would think we would have figured this out, right?
Yeah.
But are there also less severe bone deficiencies when it comes to vitamin D?
Yeah, there are more common bone deficiencies that we see nowadays, and one of those deficiencies is called osteomalacia, and that's something that you would more commonly see in the clinic for still more of a severe deficiency. And what osteomalacia really is just bone softening, and so a huge symptom of osteomalacia is just generalized bone pain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe here we can just jump into some literature I read about this, because there are actually some benefits to supplementing vitamin D or getting adequate vitamin D levels somehow when it comes to bone strength. So there are many studies supporting the notion that vitamin D supplementation reduces the risk of bone fractures, I think, which is a really big problem, especially in the elderly population.
Yeah, so even if you're not severely deficient, it can still just help you promote general bone health and even be used in part of treatment for diseases like osteoporosis.
Exactly, that's a good point. are there some other like diseases or kind of diseases you have seen in a clinic or during your studies related to vitamin D?
Yeah, so the most common one I actually saw in real life was vitamin D and its connection to mood levels and depression.
Okay.
And so where I live in the northern part of the United States where it snows a lot and it's just generally really cold. And so people don't like to go outside in the wintertime. And since people don't like to go outside in the wintertime, they're not getting a lot of UV radiation. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but with vitamin D, in order for it to be activated in your body or synthesized in your body, one of the first key reactions it has to go through is being reacted with UV light in order to form the pre-vitamin vitamin D3, which is then converted into the active hormone through a couple chemical reactions in your liver and then in your kidney. And so, yeah, that's why it's very common, I think, to see vitamin D deficiency in the winter time, especially if you live in colder climates like I do. And so a lot of people in the clinic would come in complaining about lethargy and just low mood levels in the wintertime. And one of, I think, the first things that a lot of physicians talk about or recommend to their patients in the winter is supplementing with vitamin D3. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I actually read recently a paper about it. So there was a randomized control study where they put depressed people, so really people who have like clear symptoms of depression. They divided them in two groups. Fed one group with vitamin D, the other one got a placebo. And over the time frame of 1 year, the group that received the vitamin D supplement actually got much better in terms of their depression. I think what you saw in a clinic is really backed up by scientific literature here.
That's good to know that doctors are, doing some work that's backed up by science.
That's how it should be, I think.
Yeah, that is how it should be. Okay, cool. But one thing that I do want to mention is that, like, in the clinic, the physicians also really recommended that people, if they decide that they do want to supplement, that they should supplement with the oil, liquid capsules of vitamin D, and to get vitamin D3. That was really key, to get the one that's already been activated, I guess, and doesn't need any UV light for your body to use as a hormone.
Okay. Are there any further diseases you have seen or if you learned of in regard to vitamin D?
I haven't experienced anything else, but have you found anything in your research that...
So there are some studies out there connecting vitamin D with the immune system.
Okay.
It's pretty new research, so I'm not so surprised that you haven't learned it yet. And it's still kind of confusing, I also have to add. But many people also now start taking vitamin D to support the immune system, which is again really critical during winter. Nobody wants to catch a cold, nobody wants to catch a flu. And there are some studies that really show that vitamin D supplementation reduces the chance to catch a flu or a cold. But I got to say, some other studies fail to show the same outcome. So it's still not completely clear. There seems to be a tendency towards this, but we're not 100% sure. So don't expect to take your vitamin D and not get sick. That's not how it works.
Okay, it's not a cure-all or like
not a cure-all.
Perfect preventative measure
exactly.
for the cold and the flu.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another thing is autoimmune diseases. So there's strong observational studies showing that vitamin D deficiency can lead to autoimmune diseases, including inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, and so on. However, it's really hard to do really clinical trials on those.
Okay.
Some mouse studies show the same outcome, but again, here we're not entirely sure about this.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
But it could help, I guess, prevent autoimmune diseases is what you're saying?
Yeah, it could help, but we're not entirely sure about it yet.
Okay, that's fair. But what's really interesting to me is that, I feel like for thousands of years, a lot of other people in other climates, don't get a lot of UV radiation throughout the year. Like, say, like the Eskimos, where it's winter for a majority of the year. How do they get their vitamin D? Do you think they get it mostly from their diet, or?
That's a good point. Let me start off like this. Vitamin D deficiency is really proven to be a big problem in the industrial world. So like in the United States, 30% of the population is vitamin D deficient. even more so Hispanic or Afro-Americans, due to their darker skin, they're more susceptible to vitamin D deficiency. But, as Ida mentioned, we have been fine for millions of years without supplementation. So there are really good sources how we can get vitamin D without sunlight. These sources are especially fish, fatty fish like salmon, herring, sardines, cod or cod liver oil, something Ida mentioned in the beginning. Also eggs, especially the egg yolk, can be rich in vitamin D.
Yeah, for those vegetarians out there.
Yeah. And one more thing for the vegetarians, mushrooms can also produce vitamin D actually, but only if they're exposed to sun.
Right. So it helps if they're like wild caught mushrooms then.
Yes, exactly.
Just like with salmon, wild salmon has much higher vitamin D levels than farm fish salmon.
That's
correct?
a really good point. Yeah, it has much more vitamin D.
Okay, so it's like little nuances like that I think are really important to pay attention to if you're looking for sources of vitamin D in your food, for sure.
So, and some interesting stories. So I like to do experiments on my own body to figure out what would be the best diet without supplementation actually. So this winter I didn't take any supplements at all. And I made sure I ate enough fish. I ate salmon regularly, different kinds of fish, and also cod liver and all these things, which might be gross for some people, but I got used to it.
Or I think you actually really enjoyed it, to be honest.
It's not so bad as you might imagine. However, after the winter period then, so in January, I got my blood check, my blood work, including my vitamin D levels. And my vitamin D was still in the optimal range, but in the low optimal range. So my vitamin D was at 32 nanograms per milliliter, and it is considered to be optimal at in between 30 and 80 nanograms per milliliter.
Okay, but that's definitely on the low range of normal.
It is definitely on the low range, but maybe I should also add that also your genes play a role in like your vitamin D levels. Also, what also plays a role is your age and your body weight. So these are all factors that can influence your vitamin D levels. So right now I haven't started supplementation again. I might do it. I might just increase my fish intake more. But yeah, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
So
I want to actually comment on what you said about body weight. I wouldn't even necessarily say body weight. I would say body fat content,
that's true.
Yeah, so vitamin D, like we said before, and I guess we're going to re-emphasize now, is a fat-soluble vitamin. And so people who have a higher body fat content can tend to store vitamin D in their adipocyte or their fat cells and prevent it from being used regularly. So that is really important. And then do you want to explain a little bit more about why age is important with vitamin D levels and how it's related?
I'm actually not sure if this is known. So there are studies showing that like a 70-year-old person has like 4 times less efficiency in producing vitamin D itself. But the actual mechanism behind it is unfortunately not known. Okay. I think we've covered all points so far. I think it would be helpful if you would give a short summary of what we just said for the listener and then to close it.
All right, sounds good. Well, to summarize, vitamin D is super important for bone health, for keeping up your mood levels, possibly, and may have some function with immunity and boosting your immune system and helping to prevent some autoimmune diseases. Key populations that might be deficient in vitamin D are people with darker skin, so people who produce more melatonin, who have more protection from UV light, but then because you have more protection from UV light, you aren't able to do those critical reactions to convert vitamin D into your active form in your body. And then some other groups of people that might have lower levels of vitamin D are people who are older, around the age of 70 or so, just older in general, and then people who have higher body fat content. You might just want to supplement or eat more vitamin D rich foods in order to maintain adequate vitamin D levels.
Exactly. One more thing maybe to add, before you go to the next grocery store and buy tons of vitamin D supplements, it should always be key to get everything you need from your diet, and you can overdose yourself. Vitamin D toxification is rare, but it can happen. Like
Yes.
high vitamin D levels in the blood can lead to high calcium levels in the blood. And there have been, it's rare, but there have been cases where people really got severely sick because of vitamin D overtoxification
Yeah.
or overuse.
Definitely. So what's really interesting is that vitamin D deficiency can lead to osteomalacia and bone softening, but vitamin D toxicity can also lead to the same thing. Actually, it can also lead to bone softening, and so it's super important to try to maintain that balance, and definitely consult a physician before you ever decide to take any supplements, and especially your fat soluble ones. It's really important to maintain a proper balance of these kinds of chemicals in your body, because they are chemicals and they are drugs, and vitamin D is a hormone that can adversely affect you if you're not careful with what kind of supplement you buy and what form you decide to take it in.
Exactly, very good point. However, you don't have to be scared to get overdosed when be exposed to the sun. So your body can very well regulate it itself when exposed to the sun. So it kind of equals out the levels.
Yeah.
Okay, I think with this we're at the end. Thank you very much for letting us having a look into the medical world, and I hope I could add some interesting research to it.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you a lot, and see you next time.